Good morning, Taylor. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Good, Rich. How you doing?
Good. How do you like the clock that doesn't work here on the wall? You like that?
I like it. It's right twice a day, though, right?
Just like me. But that might be a stretch to say I'm right twice a day. But now this has been in the family for years, and I sent it to once it fell into my position in custodianship. I sent it to get it fixed and serviced, and I ran it for a few days because it's one of those you got to stick a key in it and wind it
Mhm.
up every single day. And some point after a week or so, I'm like, okay, now I know why these things tend to just hang in the house.
You should like set
And
it
then
to
make it consider.
7:30.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that is a great point. I like that. See, think outside the box. Uh, while we're waiting for folks to jump on, Will Rhodes is on. Says, good morning, Rich and Taylor from Missouri. He is coin number 2269. And if you're new to the American Warrior Show, and if you want to find out if becoming a member of our self-preservation community is the right decision for not only you, but you and your family, then I encourage you to click the links in today's show notes. We got white belt to blue belt Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We got some unarmed and armed grappling. We've got less lethal. We got Dr. Dan Olesnicki, SWAT doc, teaching tactical medicine. Rich Brown takes you through an entire series on how to build a go bag and better prepare yourself for what may be coming down the pike. We got everything to keep you guys safer out there. And yeah, there we go. There's my pitch. Taylor, what do you think?
I like it. I like it.
Thank you, sir. For those that don't know, let me go and read Taylor's amazing bio. Taylor is not only a close friend. Taylor was an infantry marine assigned to security forces, where he was a member of the CQB Recapture Tactics Team (RTT). Additionally, Taylor is a former police officer, security professional, and NRA instructor. After the Marines, Taylor went to school to earn a BS in mechanical engineering. He is passionate about faith, family, fitness, firearms, security, self defense, general preparedness, engineering, and teaching. Taylor founded Defenders and Disciples, which is an amazing YouTube channel. If you're not following him there on YouTube, you're doing something wrong in life, I'll tell you that. But he is dedicated to educating and training others in faith, firearms, self protection, and fitness. Taylor's a Christian, a husband, and a father, hence the acronym for Defenders and Disciples, DAD.
It's always funny when people finally realize that. They're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, and Taylor, let's see here. I took a cue from you, my friend, and that is these icebreaker questions. I like that.
Oh, yeah.
So, in the spirit of your show, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Mm, man. Does it have to be a piece of advice that someone gave me, or can it be a piece of advice that I read?
Sure, that'll work.
Okay. Because I think from the book 12 Rules for Life, one of the best pieces of advice and one of the chapters is assume the person you're talking to knows something that you don't. And that for me, it helps throttle me in terms of like my ego, like when I'm in a debate or arguing with someone, because it's so easy to be thinking about what you're going to say next and not really listening to very carefully to what that person's saying. So when you're assuming that the person you're talking to maybe knows something you don't, and taking every opportunity you can to capitalize on and take advantage of those moments where you do learn something and you get to update your map. I think that's a very that's been one of the most valuable pieces of advice. And again, for me, it like helps to throttle me in those conversations and like back down off my ego and my high horse.
I think that's a fantastic piece of advice. Matter of fact, if I had a pretty extensive background in recruiting at every level, from being a recruiter instructor to a basic recruiter to deputy director of recruiting operations for the entire Southeast. And in our programs, we say the first step in human communication is assuming value.
Mm-hmm.
And
I
so
like
that's
that.
exactly what you just said. If you don't assume value, you're going to fall into all these intellectual traps. So you have to assume value in the person you're speaking to.
Mm-hmm.
Let's welcome some folks onto the show, Taylor. We got Chuck is on from Texas. It says, have a blessed day. Got Rasmic Gold members in the house. Good to see you, Rasmic. He says, good morning, everyone. My good friend Alan Kelly is on. Says, good morning from occupied Virginia. He is coin number 1571, waiting room at the hospital. Wife going through stress test. I hope we'll keep your wife in our prayers. I hope she's doing well, brother. What books are you reading right now?
Me, a few. I think like you, I kind of got a few going at the same time. I just started this book the other day, The Talent Code, and we were talking about it. It's pretty interesting. I like it because from an instructor standpoint, talk about like human adult learning and adult learning theory and how the brain optimally retains information and learns new skills. I like it because it's also in line with a lot of what Dusty Solomon talks about in his book, Building Shooters. So those two, working through the New Testament, and let's see what else. I think right now it's mainly just those two. Yeah.
Okay.
Can't remember the last book I finished. I read some books from like Alex Hormozy, if you're familiar with him. He's like sales and marketing. But yeah, read a lot of sales and marketing and sales copywriting books. So yeah.
Interesting.
Things I never knew about.
Well, I tell you what, that's so true, man. I hear I was a sales and marketing consultant, and obviously led and managed a lot of teams, and it's stunning how little people know. It is that because for us, systematic sales, there's 11 components, and how each component interacts with another. It's to create a closed loop to analyze your performance and et cetera, et cetera. I've often thought about putting a program together because people that have small businesses that they run out of their homes that don't have an idea how to create sectors within your community and market to each sector and track your data and all that stuff. There's very few things out there. There are things out there that for larger companies, but not necessarily a small mom and pop kind of operation.
Yeah, you should do that. Definitely.
Yeah. We got Tony on from Georgia. Hope you're doing well, sir. The Talent Code. What made you pick that up?
My buddy Brian, who's a canine trainer, I had him on. He's actually the guy I posted yesterday on the podcast. He recommended it to me last week because we were talking about some things we'll get into about online training versus, or virtual training versus in-person training, and how people optimally learn from a how the brain retains information, and like whenever you get to a point of failure, how you should like continue to work at that point and not move beyond. And it's I feel like I reference Jordan Peterson all the time, but it kind of goes back to what he says about like on that boundary between order and chaos, right? If you are in a class and the class is too easy for you, it's too much order. You're not really delving into the unknown, and so it's just too much order. If the class is far too advanced for you, it's too much chaos, and you're just trying to survive the class, and you're not able to learn. But when you're kind of on the boundary of order and chaos, you're where it have optimal meaning, and so you're able to learn optimally. And that's where I think virtual training and self-paced courses actually thrive, is because you can obviously self-pace to your own style. And I need to speed up here. I need to rewatch that part of the video. I can play the video at 2 times speed. Before I went to engineering school, I taught myself everything from arithmetic to calculus 1. And I'm not over exaggerating when I say that, because I had to take a math placement test. I'd been out of school for 6 years in the Marine Corps, University of Science, Music, and Culture. And I didn't really do very good in school or in math when I was in high school, because I was only focused on going in the Marines and just graduating. So didn't really have good math scores in high school. Had completely not really done math during my time in the Marines, and I had to take this math placement test prior to going to the undergraduate mechanical engineering program. Well, I had about 4 to 6 months before that placement test. And if you did not score well on the placement test, you had to be put in like intermediate algebra or something. Basically would add a year onto your program. And I had the GI Bill, 36 months of coverage. So I didn't want to pay for any of that out of pocket because it was a private university. So I backwards planned my curriculum, my self-paced curriculum, from calculus 1 all the way to, or backwards to, arithmetic, and watched Khan Academy, educator.com, a few other online resources and taught myself everything from arithmetic up to calculus 1. Aced the placement test. I think I missed one question, and they said they've never seen that before. And it was a proof of concept for me at the time of, oh, wow, you can actually teach yourself a lot of stuff online. And it was way faster than had I gone through an actual program and set through a class.
I love that. There's a story of back in the day. This was a POW who was sitting in Hanoi Hilton, and an American fighter pilot, and he did not go to college. I guess back prior to Vietnam, like going back to Korea, they had these things called flying sergeants. So you could enlist, and if you had the GT score and stuff like that, you could go to flight school. If you passed all those wickets, then I don't care. You can fly fighter jets without a college diploma, college degree. So he's sitting in Hanoi Hilton, like, you know what? I'm going to go to college when I get out of here. So somehow in that cell, he did exactly what you did, Taylor. He taught himself. Started with arithmetic, and in his mind worked all the way through calculus and just crushed it when he got out.
That's amazing.
I know. I don't know how you do that. That story still boggles my mind. But speaking of teaching yourself stuff, if you had to teach a class on one thing, okay, I'm going to bring you out to Warrior Camp next year, Taylor.
Gosh.
You get to teach one thing. What do you want to teach and why?
There's a lot, but just to maybe steer the conversation, I'm going to teach target focus aiming. Yeah, I'm going to
teach. That's getting into the day's show. I love it.
Yeah, segue.
Sally segue here.
Yeah. I would teach target focus aiming. Yeah.
Okay, before you give me the why, let's welcome some folks onto the show. We got Bruce on from Michigan. He is coin number 481. Good morning, Bruce. Good to have you on, sir. John Shriver out there in Yukon, Oklahoma, coin number 1919. Guys and gals, thank you for being on with Taylor and I. Taylor is with Defenders and Disciples, amazing YouTube channel, lots of free content. Taylor has a new program we're going to talk about here in just a second. Taylor, take it away.
So, target focus aiming. Every time I say that, or not every time, but most of the times when I say that, people immediately think point shooting or some sort of kinesthetic shooting style that relies on muscle memory, and you're not really using the sights, or maybe you're looking over the sights or something, or using the frame of the gun. And that's not what I'm talking about. I think there's value in those things with skill, training, distance, time, all that. But target focused aiming, as I define it, is focusing on the target. So you have a sharp, clear target, single target, both eyes open, and you have slightly out of focus sights. And you have what's called the ghost gun effect, that I call it. And for those listening, if you're not driving or you're sitting at a desk or something where you can actually do this exercise safely, try to look across the room at like a light switch or a door handle or something. Focus on that object. Okay, both eyes open. And now while you're focusing on that object, I want you to bring your thumb up into view. Don't look at your thumb. I want you to continue to look at that object with both eyes open. And if you have to, kind of force your eyes open, because some people will try to do this. Both eyes open and bring your thumb up into view. You'll notice you'll have two ghost-like thumbs that you can sort of see through. The reason for this is because of a phenomenon called parallax, which is because each eye has its own reference frame. So my right eye, if you imagine there's like a pin in front of my face, and imagine there's like two little men inside control panels inside each of my eyes. The man in my right eye sees the pin on the left, and the man in my left eye sees the pin on the right. And they're each transmitting that data to my brain. And that's what parallax is. Your brain's picking up both of those sources of information 50-50. And it's saying, well, I have two of them, but I'm going to make them kind of ghost-like because each person can see through the other person's perspective. So that's this ghost gun effect that I teach people to utilize when they're doing target focused aiming. So you're both eyes open, focus on the target, and you're looking through this. Now, for years and years, the firearms training industry community has taught people hard front sight focus. And there's value in that. And the value in that is, or there's reason for that. And the reason for that is because misalignment of the sights will grow as the distance to the target increases. And that's just due to minutes of angle that angle increases. But deviations in sight picture, the superimposing that on the target, if you're always aiming here, you're just to the left of the target, or right, I don't know what y'all's perspective is, but just off the target, it will always be just off the target with that sight picture, but a slight deviation in the sights. So there's a reason for why they teach that, because that it's so important to drill that home and drill that sight alignment home, equal height, equal light. But you can still get equal height, equal light while converging your eyes. When I say converging, how your eyes are right now, they're converged on this pin. As I bring it closer, they cross-eyed. But
I think I just found the thumbnail for today's show.
There you go. That's it, man. That's it. Clickbait.
That's right.
So as your eye, no, you're fine. So as your eyes are converged to that target and you have that double image, you're actually able to use that double image to align your sights, because you still can obtain enough data. And I've practiced this out to 75 yards with iron sights with a Glock 43. And so, which is a really short sight radius, right? So there's not much room for error in those, but it works. And I would say most people would say that, oh, well, yes, you can do target focus out to 10 yards, maybe 15 yards, because they're really talking about point shooting, or kind of like this whole looking over your sights. And I'm talking about looking through your sights. And this is going to sound weird, but I actually relate it to shooting iron sights like a red dot sight. And it's like a red dot sight with parallax, because you have you have to align the front and rear sight. But yeah, that's what I would teach, because the only reason I teach shooting is because I think that it's a valuable tool to defend yourself and defend your life, defend your loved one's life. I don't teach it for, well, I mean, I think competitive shooting is fun, but I only think it's fun in the sense of it is good practice for defensive shooting. But like slow bullseye fire, Olympic shooting, that type of stuff, I get it. That would be fun, but that's not my goal when I'm teaching people how to shoot. My goal is, how can I teach you how to use this tool to defend your life or defend someone else's life? And my argument is, if you're going to have to shoot someone in self-defense, it is tactically advantageous to be threat focused, and it protects you. I believe it also protects you legally, because if you were to go to court after shooting someone and you were to have a savvy attorney, and I don't think any public or I don't think any DA would know this to ask these questions, but if they were to go up to you to say, what were you trained to do? Were you trained to focus on the sight, or were you trained to focus on the target when you went through training? Let's say it's an officer. What were you trained to do in your police academy? To focus on the sight?
That's what I was going to say. And for context, you were a police officer. For
Yes.
those that are joining us late. Yeah.
And we had iron sight. Like the entire time I was an officer, we had iron sights. We had not gone to the red dots. And I know a lot of departments that do. And so this argument's kind of becoming moot, but there are a lot of people and departments that still only use iron sights. But imagine an officer was in a shooting with iron sights, and the DA said, were you looking at your front sight, or were you looking at my client, or were you looking at the guy you shot when you shot him? Or were you trained to look at your sights, or trained to look at the target? And if he's going to say, I was trained to look at my sights, then a follow-up question could be, okay, were you looking at the person you shot, or were you looking at your sights when you shot him? Well, if he said he was looking at the person he shot, now he's admitting to acting outside of his training. But if he said he's looking at his sights, then he could go up to if it's jury, he'd go up to the jurors and say, okay, hold your thumb in front of your face. Now, can you identify the thing I'm holding in my hand across the room, or whatever distance it was that the officer took the shot? Now, is this going to completely demolish the case? No. But we know juries and we know judges, and it could seed a lot of doubt. Be like, oh, yeah, you're right. He's focusing on this thing right in front of his face. How could he identify something across the room? Because it's a very esoteric line of questioning, but I think it's something that when you tell people, especially people who don't know what they're doing, they realize, oh yeah, that doesn't really make sense, because it kind of doesn't make sense, right? Let's focus, especially when it's a threat and it's someone who's not static and not with a nice contrasting background like a cardboard target is, that's moving in and out of cover elevating and lowering their threat conditions. Let's focus on them, because sights are static, meaning they don't really change. But the sights I'm using dry firing look the same in a competition, are going to look the same in a gunfight or a shooting. But the target is always different. It's never going to, I mean, even from one shooting to the other. And so that's dynamic. So let's focus on the thing that's more likely to change and the thing that I need more data from to make a decision. And this is why I really like what Dusty's doing with the Neuro, because it forces the shooter to gain visual data to make that decision instead of some arbitrary command like up or fire or gun, which does not happen
Or
in real
beep.
life.
Yeah,
Or beep.
on the yeah.
Exactly. So that's where I love that, because it's, and not only that, but once you get that stimulus to start shooting, you have to continually process and make sure that it hasn't shut off. The stimulus hasn't shut off, so you know when to stop shooting. Right? It's not this whole idea where you see these cops that just do a mag dump. Now, some of that can be stress. Yeah. I completely understand. Like, because it's probably the only shooting they've ever been in. But I think there is a case to be made that some of that is also because they're no longer looking at the target. Once they make that decision, oh, bang, 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 and then they go to slide lock, and now they have an opportunity to, like, while they're doing a reload, reassess, because they're obviously not looking at their sights then. But I think it's a very valuable skill set to understand. And most people who are really good at shooting or have been shooting for doing competitive shooting, they're already doing target focused. They just naturally progress to that because you kind of have to in a really dynamic sport. But I think the dogma for years has been you can't teach it to new shooters. And I disagree with that. I think it takes longer than teaching the traditional style of front sight focus, because I think just teaching people to focus on the front sight post is almost a shortcut to get them to align the sights properly.
Well,
on a
yeah.
blurry
You have to have
target.
an understanding of that, though, right? You have to
Yes,
have an understanding of sight line of sight picture.
Yes, you absolutely do. But I think you can get that understanding while still not having your eyes converged on the front sight.
We got some questions, but before I get there, I like a couple things. Number one, I like the fact that your contextual application is appropriate in understanding the context in which we're talking about this. We're not talking about bullseye shooting at the Olympics. We're not talking about, grandpa that's going to take his kid to go plinking. We're talking about this is a defensive context, and this is why you should be using it this way. The second thing is, when you think about shooting people, they do two things when they've been shot. They move and they don't die fast enough. So if we know they're going to move, whether that's moving into their pockets or moving to run laterally or at you or whatever, then that tells us we probably need to have an awareness of what the threat's doing and not just what the front sight's doing. And they're not going to die fast enough. So you're going to have to fire more than one shot.
Yeah.
I'm going to, before I get to Tony's new comment, I'm going to take this one on. It says, who decided a college degree was a bar between enlisted and officer? Of course, you can go back to our military is founded on the British model. And Tony knows this because he was a Marine as well. And, it goes back to that. But, we have always made allowances going back to the British Royal Navy for the warrant officer community, like your old pal Rich Brown was in. Whereas if you're a technical specialist, you can become a commissioned officer just by merit alone. And of course, after they, and just so people don't understand the difference in chief warrant officers and the other officer corps, they're all commissioned officers. There's no difference in Title 10. The only difference is one is in a restricted community and one's in an unrestricted community. I could only do recruiting, whereas that guy, although he might be a military police officer, be a lieutenant captain, at some point during his career, he's going to have to step out of that role and come into a B billet. Whereas the warrant officer community, you're going to stay that technical specialist forever. So probably a little bit far afield to today's show, but I did want to answer that. Tony's next point is natural point of aim applies to all shooting disciplines. It's how you build your position. What do you think about that, Taylor?
No, I think natural point of aim is extremely important. Understanding your natural point of aim, though, in those dynamic contexts with those shootings, review several police shootings and civilian shootings and tell me what seems natural about that.
Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, obviously it applies if you're shooting a rifle or something like
Mm-hmm.
that from a prone position or some sort of static position. But if I'm running with a gun in my hand, that's, well, where's the natural
Yeah.
point of aim? I got a USPSA match tomorrow, as a matter of fact, and it'd be hard pressed to say there's any natural point of aim when the buzzer goes off and you're running the stage, unless
I
I'm
will
missing
say that,
something.
everything falls on a continuum. And so, well, not everything, but gender doesn't fall on a continuum.
Some people think it does.
There we go. So, I think natural point of aim falls on a continuum as well. So when you're doing very precise, let's say you're doing the KD range, Marine Corps boot camp, like you're snapping in with a natural point of aim. You're every single point of contact you have with the ground, you're to the point of you're closing your eyes and breathing, getting your natural respiratory pause and opening your eyes and making sure that your sights are still on target, right? That's like the maximum natural point of aim.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a continuum of that. And like what you're talking about with competitive shooting, I still think in those moments you're obtaining natural point of aim, if not only because your feet are pointed towards the target, right? Instead of like facing this way and like, oh, I'm gonna like rotate my body in a really unergonomic positioning towards the target. So I think that like it just falls on a continuum. And
I'll buy that.
yeah. So,
Oh, that makes sense. I mean, that makes sense. You want your body aligned, and whether it's the pelvic girdle moving in that direction. I might be shooting like a turret, but yeah. And Tony says, just like dry firing. So we talked about, if you had one class that you could teach anything, what would you teach? And you talked about the concept, and you have a new program out. I'm going through the program right now. I'm gonna tell you, it's fantastic, and I'm not just saying because you're on here. It's incredibly well done, very professionally done, and very thoughtful. I was like, you and I were talking yesterday. You and I share a couple things in common, and one of which is, very litigiously minded, very prosecutory in how we approach things, and you can tell that by your course. So well done, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It means a lot.
I want to shift gears here and say, because I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about it. And this is one of the things that for the past 10 years, the American Warrior Society has singularly stovepipe focused on self-defense. And then from that, you can go preparedness, you can go shooting, edge weapons, home. And we've talked to all the experts over the past decade. However, because of the state that the country's in, we've started tiptoeing into the other stuff. And I think it would be, some sort of moral cowardice if we didn't do that. I don't want to become a political show, but at the same time, I think the nation is in trouble, my personal opinion. And I realize too that this is also a legacy podcast. The grandkids might see this, and can you imagine that when they read my journals or they watch some of this content, they're like, well, no, the world was on fire, Granddad. Why didn't you talk about it? My God, man, were you completely oblivious to what's going on? Or maybe the world's not on fire. What's your take, Taylor?
No, I think there's definitely a lot of issues going on right now that we have never seen before. And the tensions are extremely high between these two opposing belief systems. Or maybe not even two, I think several opposing belief systems. And it does not seem like it's heading in a better direction. I think this election year, and I hate that everything seems to be kind of bracketed by elections and these big, but it just seems that's what happens is these election years, and who's going to be who's going to be the president, who's going to be in charge is like causing everyone so much anxiety and angst. And so I think this year is going to be pretty crazy, regardless of who. I mean, I think we basically just had a coup in our country, where with the Democratic Party, we've seen the type of we've seen the
Can you qualify that remark? Because that's a pretty significant. I agree with you, by the way.
Yeah.
But for those that are not paying attention, I know that the 10 folks watching us live are paying attention. I don't mean disrespect to the folks that are switched on that are listening to us, but for those that somebody shares this content with them and they're
Just
like,
kind of breeze over that.
yeah, like, who?
Yeah.
Banana
So,
Republic
okay.
stuff, Taylor. What are you talking about?
Yeah. And let me qualify this with saying that I haven't dug into the details of everything that happened as much as I should. Like I'm well aware of my ignorance of a lot of things, and in this space, I don't watch all the news all the time and follow everything, but just kind of putting the pieces together and seeing how things unfolded. You know, we had I was actually in Ocoee, Tennessee when the attempted assassination took place. 2.5 hours away from home, thinking like, oh my gosh, is civil war about to break out? Because I got a text from a buddy. All he said was Trump shot. That's it. No context. Like, okay, this is, and I had no service in Ocoee. But so we had that happen on Saturday, and miraculous. I believe it's a miraculous thing that happened. He did not actually get killed when you look at the timing and how that unfolded. So if I'm in the Democratic Party, if I'm running the Democratic Party and I'm seeing this and I'm thinking of optics, I'm thinking of positioning and things, I'm seeing this Trump figure that people already, a massive number of people already either idolize or really support and get behind. Had this heroic thing happen to him, this harrowing event, with these amazing, perfectly cropped pictures, just like amazing. The composition. I had a buddy who's a photographer who broke down the picture and showed like the rule of thirds and how it was perfectly cropped. Yeah. So this happens. Meanwhile, you have Sleepy Joe over here that just completely bombed the debate, and everyone's realizing, oh my gosh, this ain't gonna be good. Trump's still playing 18 holes of golf, and then Biden can barely make it up the stairs to Air Force One. So you're seeing this. I'm thinking they thought, okay, we have to do something. We got to pull the Hail Mary. Biden, you got COVID. Because Monday morning he had COVID. Or I think it was Monday. I think it was like Monday he had COVID. And it just seemed like really odd timing. Now, you could make the case that, well, he did attend a lot of events right after the shooting, and maybe they hopped him up on some of those drugs they give people in their late stages of life, and then he crashed off of that. When you crash off of that, you're more susceptible to get sick. I think that's possible too, but then he gets COVID and just kind of disappears for a bit, right? There's not really any, from what I understand, could be wrong, but there weren't really any reports from him, or not reports, but statements from him that didn't seem kind of off, like there was something missing. Maybe someone fabricated it, and he just kind of disappeared. And I mean, within just a few days, they pivoted to Kamala. I mean, the ability to immediately pivot that much institutional inertia is amazing. It has to be done with some sort of planning. Those campaign preparations had to be in place on some level to be able to implement them, flip the levers that quickly. I think. I could be wrong, but that's why I think it's a coup. And you say coup and it sounds like melodramatic. It sounds like, oh, you're just that's such a extreme, like, well, it doesn't always have to be like crazy and
with tanks
and all that stuff. So it can be more subtle, and I think that's what we saw.
Yeah. Ted is on. He is coin number 1461. Wish all a good day. A good friend, Don Bothwell, out there in beautiful Montana. It was great seeing you, sir, at there in that Kalispell area. Don says, sorry, I'm late. Good morning from Northwest Montana, coin number 2270. Thank you, Don, for being on. So let's get back to this. I think if I was building a case on this, whether it was a coup or not, I think I could prove the point, because if you look at, I think the textbook case of when a president says, I'm not going to run again is, and we have to go back to Johnson, and he gets on national television from the Oval Office and states very categorically, something to the tone of, I will not seek, nor will I accept the nomination by my party to be president. I'm like, okay, unambiguous. However, and of course, everybody controls his social media. If you think the president's running around with a phone, doing social media campaigns, especially one as cognitively compromised as our current sitting president, you're foolish. So somebody's controlling that, and all of a sudden a PDF gets uploaded with his signature on it. And I had an electronic signature as an officer on my stuff that my staff could use, and it looked like Rich Brown signed it. And maybe it wasn't. So, and it's not on official letterhead from the Office of the President of the United States. It's just a PDF document uploaded to social media saying, I'm done. And it reminds me of the movie Wag the Dog. Did you ever see that movie? God almighty, you got to go watch it. That's your homework assignment, Mr. Taylor.
Gotcha.
Watch Wag the Dog. Now, so for context, it comes out in the mid-90s when Clinton is going through his Monica Lewinsky scandal, and it is eerily similar. But the point I'm trying to make is they start a phony war in order to get the heat off the president. And just like they did with Joe Biden, they say the president's plane is broke down. He can't come back to the States because Air Force One's having some problems. So he's going to be stuck there on the tarmac while his handlers are trying to figure it out back here in the States. And the parallel I'm going for here is they decide they got to start a war. Well, at some point, the Republican Party figures out this is a phony war. So they get on national television and go, I just want to bring to you the breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. This is like the ranking member of the Republican Party. The war is over. America's won. So they just killed the fake war. And the Democratic handlers are like, yeah, the war's over. And they're like, what is our war? It's like, no, I just saw it on television. It's got to be true. And I think this is the case here. As soon as that comes out, it's over there, Biden. What are you going to do now? Go out and say, I don't have control of my social media. I don't have control of my cabinet. I don't have control of anything. Look what they just did to me. Or you're going to go, all right, I'll do what's best for the country. And I'll slowly step aside because I'm sure they were like, you want to see us go at you? And there's a lot of, I think Biden on a recent thing said that Nancy Pelosi pushed him out on an interview. And you can find it. It just happened a few days ago. And of course, she's out there going, not really. I told him I had some concerns. So I think your point about a coup is not unfounded. I think it is completely with merit. And before we go any further, William Hollenbeck is on. Good morning, William. Coin number I don't remember, but glad to have you on, sir. Anything additionally to add? Because on the coup part, before we go into where's America headed?
No, I just think, if we're at that point where that can happen, that's a really, really bad position we're in. And it really, in the most true sense, it undermines democracy. And now people will be like, oh, we're not a democracy. Okay. Yes, we are.
We're a constitutional republic.
Exactly. But we use a democratic system to elect those representatives. So, I have to always throw that out there. But it's just not. And I think if you're in the Democratic Party and let's say you wanted Biden to be president, and all of a sudden that party's like, nope, never mind. This is who you're picking now. You're like,
well, even Trump, say what you want about Trump, but he's like, look, he's the sitting president. He's the one that wanted to run, yet they forced him out. This isn't right, And I'm like, man, that takes courage to say that. Regardless of what you feel about the man, but to go, hey, look, I'm standing up for the guy that's had a crosshairs on me, literally, for the past X number of years, and to go, this is completely unprecedented in American politics. Guile is on from the Philippines. Says, sorry I'm late. Good morning, everyone. Ted says, Guile, impressed you can deal with the time differences. Happy you joined us. So I think beyond the coup, man, I think we've got some dark times ahead. But I don't even when pressed as to what some of the catalysts could be, Black Swan event. I mean, I don't know. At this point, we're living in reality television.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's. I think I talked to you about this the other day. It's this season on whatever reality we're in, and all these weird things keep unfolding, and some of this stuff to the point where if we were in a boardroom pitching the idea for the episode, people would be like, "No, that doesn't make sense. It's too on the nose."
Yeah. Yeah. The riders would be like, no, we're not doing it. Now,
Yeah.
get this one. It's crap. Nobody's going to buy that. Like,
Yeah.
we're there. But I think that right now is the time to prepare. What does preparedness look like? I think there's too many variables to necessarily go into it all because it depends on, are you urban or rural? Do you live in an apartment with a wife and kid? Are you single? Do you have disposable income to maybe purchase a few things or attend some training or what have you? But I can tell you this, if it goes kinetic, and I think it will, as to what, is it going to be just the kinetic stuff limited to urban areas like we saw during the Summer of Love? Or is it going to be everywhere? Is it going to be armies? Is it going to be a military coup? I mean, your guess is as good as mine, but I think everything is on the table at this point.
Yeah.
What is the most, we're talking about threats, and I know we're elevating ourselves way beyond the operational tactical level to the strategic level, but I think it's interesting to have those conversations. What do you think is the greatest existential threat right now to our nation?
So I'm going to steal an answer that someone else gave on my show, and I think it's God. I think our country is heading in a direction that is not good morally, biblically, with abortion and all the other things that are going on. And if you just read through the Bible and see how long a nation could get away with that stuff before there was some sort of judgment that was brought on them, I don't think we're heading in a good direction. And I think that, in terms of having the most consequence, I think that bears far more consequence than any nation state could bring to bear.
Yeah.
Now, beyond
Tony
that,
says,
next to that, I think it would be the whole thing with our border crisis and the fact that we're basically just letting, if we were playing a game, some sort of strategic game online, and you saw this one character sending all of his players into the other character's board, you'd be like, oh, that guy's about to take him over. Like it's so obvious that we have this massive border crisis, and then you have the Chinese that are buying up random pieces of property next to military installations. That's not a good thing either. Huh?
No, nothing random about that.
Oh yeah. Definitely not random.
Yeah. Tony says, Rich, was candidate picked for you on your point scale? And I have a 10-point scale. We're already at between 11 and 14, depending on how you count some of these things. Because I was trying to look into the future, with my little crystal ball here, and I had put on there years ago the potential assassination attempt. Well, no, I'm sorry, I said assassination, and but I didn't give it a value of it because I'm like, look, they went after this guy and did a smear campaign, did everything they could to try to destroy him. Then they went with lawfare. That may or may not work. We'll see how that fleshes out, and did several other things. I'm like, well, they're going to have to kill the guy. I mean, that's the only thing left on the table at this point. So what does that say about the state of our country? To your point about, is it biblical? I mean, yeah, I think so. You mentioned at the beginning of the show, you're reading the New Testament right now, so it's close to your heart. But historically, I think it agrees with you. This is late stage capitalism. This is, I agree with biblically. I think you're absolutely on the right track. Historically, you're on the right track. And of course, we think alike on that. Good morning, Doug. He says, good morning, everyone, from a cloudy Columbus, Ohio. He is coin number 78, one of the original plank owners. Glad to have you on, sir.
Wow, 78.
Be safe out. Yeah, one of the old G's. So yeah, as far as the existential crisis, I think it's definitely in the direction that we're going in right now. When you turn your back on God, I mean, it's just that should underpin everything, and it should underpin our form of government, constitutional republic. And when you remove that, it's like, okay, well, there's what's holding up the foundation then? Nothing. And then you get everything that we're seeing running rampant right now. Matt Sims is on. He says, good morning, gentlemen. Sorry I'm late. Thank you for your stand. Headed to IDPA Nationals. Get to go keep training. Yeah, good luck out there, Matt. Tell Seeklander howdy. Hope you guys have a great match. as far as where do you see the country heading? And because like you, I'm a big believer in reverse planning. Where do you want to be? Okay, great.
Mhm.
That's your signpost. Now let's create a plan to get there. So where do you see us if we were having this conversation August the 16th, 2025? What's going on?
Man, that's hard to say. With how many wild directions it's gone, I have no idea. And something I wanted to add on to the thing about, even though I think there's a lot of parts of our country that are heading in a really bad direction, I think that also can create an opportunity for bounce back, and people, when those things go too far, people realize like, whoa, this is not, it's no longer that slow boil. So people become more aware of what's actually happening. And so having an opportunity for like a revival, for example, I think the ground is perfect for something like that to happen, which could be great. So they could go in that direction, right? We could get to a point where it's like, oh, we need Jesus, we need God.
Yeah.
But in terms of 2025, August 2025, man, I don't know, man. I have no idea. I don't know if I could be ready for anything.
Yeah. It's a multivariable probability.
What do you think?
And those are always hard to parse out. I'm with you. I mean, that's why I ask. I ask smart
Okay.
people that I value their opinion. But I mean, if again, looking historically, it could be a very rapid balkanization that happens, and it could
Hmm.
be without kinetic, or it could be kinetic. I mean, we could see what's happening with the UK. They're using the power of the pocketbook, with turning off funds for pensioners. It's really cool to have that pension until it gets cut off. It's really cool to say Tennessee and Texas and a few other states are going to go our own way because we think that this is immoral, illegitimate, bankrupt kind of government. And then they go, yeah, that's cool. Anybody that lives within those borders, we're turning off your Social Security, we're turning off your some of these other things, and we don't have to fire a shot to bring you to heel.
That is a great point.
So
Yeah.
yeah, there's so many ways that they could do this and try to keep it bloodless. Uh, of course, the last Civil War we had, Abraham Lincoln had no problem
Mhm.
killing hundreds of thousands of Americans. Not before he gave the moral dimension of freeing the slaves. At the outset, he's very, very, very clear. This is to preserve the Union. I want to get to Don's comment because this is something else we need to talk about when we talk about existential threats and how to prepare for them. Don says the domestic threat, in my opinion, will be from internal sources, fifth column terrorists, and the criminal subculture that already exists will probably feel like the laws and their enforcement no longer work. They'll feel empowered to exert themselves in both urban and rural environments. Every community has their criminal outlaw element. And of course, Don's a retired Army colonel. And I think he's right. Dr. Fuller, who just joined us here from South Carolina, coin number 1620. Thank you for being on, Dr. Fuller. He and I were talking the other day, and two Jordanians in a rented van tried to breach the gate at Quantico. And it made all the news, not at all. I forget what spooked the gate guards, but something's not adding up and you need to stop. And they hit the accelerator and they threw up the barriers and the truck crashed into it. And then they go before a magistrate and they let them go. Just wander the interior, but you better show up to your court appearance. So,
What?
oh yeah, I'll send you the article. So
Oh, wow.
it makes you wonder, though, as others have pointed out, have they rolled them? Have they turned them? And now they're going to let them meet up with whomever else may be here already. There was
Mhm.
a known terrorist that was recently caught in New Mexico. So, but this porous border, we don't know who's here. And if we think we do, we're lying to ourselves. And again, it goes
Mhm.
back to that poisoned M&M metaphor, right? You know what I'm talking about, right?
No, I'm gonna nod my
You
head
have a
like I do
bowl of
though.
them. Yeah, you have a bowl of 300,000 M&Ms, and in there, let's say just 1% of them are poisonous. Are you going to eat one of the at a
Heck no.
random stand? Like, hell no. Are you going to let your kids do it? So
No.
why in God's name are we doing this?
Mhm.
And let me tell you something else. I think that's an existential threat. People are going to laugh at me at first, but bear with me just a second since we're having this friendly conversation. Fact checkers scare the hell out of me. And let me explain. When most of us that are of my age, mid-50s, were growing up, we didn't have a damn fact checker. We had the encyclopedias in the family living room, or Funkin' Wagnalls or something, and that was your fact check. If you read something in a newspaper, your teacher said something, you're like, that doesn't sound right. Oh, okay, well, that's not right. That's yellow journalism. This is crap. Nowadays, we're being told what the facts are, and I saw this yesterday with CNN. It's like, fact checking President Trump's latest speech 20 times that he lied to the American public. And I always love those, because if you start going down the list, it's like, he said Kamala Harris was responsible for the things that are going on now with regard to retail theft and $950 limit and all that stuff. And that's absolutely objectively false. I'm like, okay, but you keep reading, or you do a little research, like, well, her office, when she was the attorney general, supported that in every way that they could. So it's like, okay, well, her as a person may not have got out there and rallied the troops, but when it's coming from her office that she's holding, then one can only assume that she supported it, right? I mean, it's my point is, those fact checkers, if you're just going off of that, then Donald Trump is the biggest liar. And I remember his first 100 days in office, CNN or someone put out like 3,000 lies told already in Trump's first 100 days in office, and I'm like, whoa, what in the hell? This must be, what is this? Lie number 1,718. And it's like, Trump said that the Brooklyn Bridge was the greatest bridge America's ever produced. That's not true. If you're judging it by span, width, load, structure, blah, 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 it's an absolute lie. And I'm like, okay, man.
Gosh.
And you just started picking through there. There's nothing of substance to any of this. So the Time cover photo that they did of Trump melting down, and then the one of Kamala Harris, it's her time now. And it's like, you're being lied to. And if you think the fact checkers have your best interest at heart, you're foolish.
Now, if you could find me a fact checker that has like balanced, where it's like if they'll do it for both sides, but very rarely you'll see that, if ever. And
there's no such thing as balance. No, there's no such thing as balance. You know why? Because it goes back to the financial collapse, the housing market collapse. They were going to giving ratings for fees. If you're rating my bonds, if you're rating these mortgage-backed securities, and I'm paying you a fee to rate them objectively, if I don't like the rating, I take them somewhere else, and then you lose revenue. Same here. If you're an independent third-party fact checker, you're not independent, because Facebook's Meta is paying the tab on your thing. And if they don't like the leaning that you're giving this, the spin you're putting on it, they're going to go somewhere else. So Doug says, it is my opinion that we need to focus on the basics: God, family, community, growing and preparing our own food, personal protection training, debt reduction. These things help us to handle any crisis, no matter what. Here, sir. Absolutely spot on. Doug says, please correct me if I'm wrong. It was a Jordanian national who was arrested for plotting attacks against political figures, and he was arrested the day before the attempted Trump assassination. I believe you are correct, sir. I love this comment, Dr. Fuller. It's actually a Lincoln quote. Quote, if destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of free men, we must live through all time or die by suicide. And I think he gave that quote prior to the outbreak of the War of Secession. What does he say here? He says, as with so much in the world, the first question I ask about fact checkers is simply, who is paying them? Exactly what I just said. Who's paying the tab?
When going back to the military base attempted attack, that's one thing I think we've talked about before, where I don't think the general public understands how vulnerable our bases are, right? We think we're the most powerful military in the world, which I think is absolutely the case. And when we go and exert our dominance elsewhere beyond our borders, I think we do a very effective job of that. Or we can accomplish whatever our mission is. You can quibble about whether or not you think the mission's good or not, but I think we can exert our power very effectively. But the paradox is that our bases are actually far more vulnerable than I think the general public understands. And what I mean by that is, our military service members are not armed on base. So
Right.
Yeah, we'll give you the fully automatic guns, the bombs, the grenades, everything to go play in someone else's backyard. But when you're back in our backyard, you got to lock it all back up in the armory, and we don't trust you with it, and we don't trust you with pretty much anything. So the only people are guarding the base are military MPs. And I've talked to other officers and high-ranking leaders, and no one I've spoken to seems to understand that, or seems to know of any sort of contingency or reactionary plans should a base get attacked. Right? I'm sure the MPs have gone through some sort of a drill of, hey, if that, for example, that attempted gate breach, I'm sure they practice that stuff. But there's not really, hey guys, if Spetsnaz comes in on a waterfront attack at one of our bases, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go respond to the armory. We're going to do something to fight them back. There's no, because the MPs are not going to be able to fight that. There's only so many of them on shift at a time. So it's just a very bizarre thing where if you had a group of like 50 well-trained mercenaries or people that just so happen to cross our border, they could probably take over Lejeune, and it would be a long time before we could respond. And I don't even know what the response would be. They would have to rally, figure out what's going on, and then do something. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I absolutely agree with you, man. Absolutely. It would not take, I used to think about this when I was at Parris Island. You could take Parris Island easily. It's not like we've got radar out there looking for submersible craft that are heading or Zodiacs head to the shore. And like you said, everything's locked up at the armory, and then the ammunition's at the ammunition supply point, and it's behind gates and guards and stuff like that. And to put the ammunition and the weapons together, if we were attacked, it's not going to happen. There's no plan to coordinate that.
No.
And you could roll it up rather quickly. And I thought we saw this happen at there was a base attack in Afghanistan. The Taliban were trying to capture Prince Harry, who was a helicopter pilot there at the time. Most Americans never heard about it. And it was pretty much beaten back by a few Marine Corps helicopter pilots, and a few of them died in the process. And I mean, if you think about that, and I think this is one of the reasons why they didn't want to advertise that, was as close that they got to capturing a member of the royal family. And what would that have looked like?
Can you imagine? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Definitely read up on that one. It'll blow your mind, because they breached it like that and rolled in and were fighting their way to the hand, destroyed. They did fire the base commander. It's one of the rare instances where someone was held accountable, because they got in there and destroyed. Oh my God, I can't remember how many Harriers and Cobras and all kinds of stuff. It was a really successful attack. But it speaks to what you're saying. And that's a base in country. On a base here in the United States, especially one that's on the coast, roll right over it. TC says, you're absolutely correct about our base security. How many times have we seen our bases successfully attacked by a single active killer? Yeah, what was it, Hassan? Nidal Hassan, the Army psychiatrist major who went into a pre-deployment brief and killed more than a dozen soldiers. Let's see here. Dr. Fuller says, wasn't Harry sitting down to a video interview with a journalist when the attack started? I'm not sure what his status was, but of course they were quick to say, yeah, but he was never in real danger. Yeah, bull crap. Don says, just the size of our bases makes them difficult to secure. The perimeters can be measured in hundreds of miles on some of them. Many of them are not even completely fenced. If you know the right trails or roads to use, you could drive on and off base, not be detected. Yeah, and I think who knows how much we're going to see of that. Gal says security sometimes is very lax, sometimes not fully equipped. Ted says, as a general manager at a nuclear power plant, worried security might shoot some crazy fence climber. It happens, and it should happen. My good friend is GS-15, and that's what he's in charge of across the nation. And he would tell you they don't have powers of arrest so much as they have rules of engagement within those facilities. Doug says, with my son being active military, I visited him at several bases in the U.S. The vulnerability that I can see just driving by the bases and at the main gate is readily apparent, which is actually kind of scary to think about. Yeah, I mean, the points of entry and points of exit are relatively secure, but once you get into the soft spot, or you cut a chain link fence somewhere a mile down the road and you can pour in as much as you want.
Mhm.
It's unbelievable.
And I think they're right. I think it's going to be almost impossible to completely secure it from someone being able to breach its perimeter. The problem I see is that they don't trust the soldiers, the airmen, the Marines with
Mhm.
having their guns on them, either just concealed carry, which I think that's kind of some bases. I think the CO can actually give authorization for certain people to conceal carry now, but even just having their personal service weapon on them. And I think that stems from this idea where, well, we're here now, so everything's okay, and we're at home base, and nothing can happen at home base, so you really don't need your gun anymore. Like, I would assume that in Israel, when you're back in the base, I bet you still have your gun on you. I don't know that, but I would imagine that just because their existential threat is in their backyard, they're like, yeah, what do you mean turn your gun in? Like, why would you ever turn your gun in? What's a weapons card?
Yeah.
And but our bases, it's like, all right, you're done with training here. Come back, turn your weapon in. Let's spend the next 3 hours cleaning the gun, and then get your little weapon card and come back and get it when you're ready to go play army again.
No, you're right. I haven't been in Israel in more than 30 years, so this is way out of date. But back in the day, you would see because they were conscripted. Most everybody knows that. So you graduate high school, you go into the military. I think men did 3 years, women did 2, or something like that back then. I don't know what it is now. And you got like $60 a month. That's all. You didn't get paid a lot of money. You had enough money for like sundry items and stuff like that. So they didn't have money for cars. So what you saw is they would walk out of base in their civilian attire with an AR slung across their back, and they're hitching rides to try to get to wherever their family was at
Mhm.
on the weekend. So you would see just right outside bases and on the side of the roads, all these young 18 to 22-year-olds thumbing a ride in civvies with their AR and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, and think about what a strong country that makes. And to your point about, you can't have a firearm on base. That's absolutely true. I was a commissioned officer, had a concealed carry license for X number of years, decades, and had done all this stuff and training. They still can't carry a gun. I can't carry concealed. I can't have a gun in my car. If I get caught, I'm getting smoked. It just,
Mhm.
I don't think for someone outside the military, they would even understand
No.
that. They wouldn't believe it. Like, what are you talking about?
Mhm. Which I think that's why it was such a
Doctor,
shock whenever that base was
Mhm.
attacked, and people were like, "Wait, like 1 or 2 people with
What?
a gun that came on a base and was able to kill that many people for that long, and no one stopped them?"
Yeah. Dr. Fuller says they don't trust the soldiers at all. In the U.S., it's completely true. Those who served in Afghanistan recall that you were forced to clear your weapon every time you came onto Bagram or Kandahar. Yeah. Doug says, while visiting Israel in 2017, I noticed that every military person in uniform was armed in public, male and female. Love that. Guile in the Philippines says, during my time as a reservist, we were allowed to carry our personal pistols as long as the permits were legal. I love that, as it should be.
Mhm.
And what if you live in, I think my brother, when he was, I don't remember if he was head of base security at the time in the Coast Guard or what have you. He was a law enforcement officer. So I don't know if he was this senior one on base, whatever, but he talked to the base commanders like, hey, sir, we're down here in Miami, or right outside of Miami on this Coast Guard base. Our servicemen and women have to drive through downtown Miami and all in the hood just to get here. And they're putting themselves at substantial risk. Can they carry their concealed firearms? And finally got the base commander to issue the order that they could, which is the way it should be. It's common sense.
Mhm.
Common
If
sense
you
isn't
don't
common
trust
at
them
all.
enough to carry their guns on them, then you need to either give them better training or have higher standards for recruiting, because
Yeah.
there's something off there. That if that's the reason, is you just don't trust them or something. But I think that's what it boils down to.
Speaking of that, what is your EDC, Taylor?
I carry a Glock 48 MOS with it's got a Holosun EPS on it and a TLR. But yeah, I love that gun.
What's the TLR? Do you
And
know?
my mindset. I carry my mindset on me every day.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, I always, anytime I get asked that question, I was like,
I know.
it
I just
changes.
thought about it. Right when I said it, I was like, I should have said mindset because that's what he said on my show.
Yeah.
Would you
Yeah.
ask me?
Because it's like, yeah, because it's what's between your ears. It doesn't matter if you can have, I mean, and I always throw that guy, the Parkland guy under the bus, Officer Peterson, I believe his name was Scott Peterson, who hid while 17 children were being murdered. And then cried and boo-hooed and clapped when he got off of it. And it's like, bro, what are you talking about? You had one job that day. Again, it was a gun-free zone, but you were the only one authorized to carry the firearm that day, and you didn't have the courage and intestinal fortude and spine to go and use it.
But hey, I bet he was really good at meeting with principals, and I bet he was a really, teddy bear uniform, which is really what
you were an SRO. You want to speak to any of that?
Oh gosh, do we have time?
Yeah, I hate to throw it out there like that, but I mean, you and I have talked about this ad nauseum personally.
Yeah, before I left my department, and I'm not going to say the department, but it's the department in Tennessee. I was an SRO for about a year, and I loved the job. I love being a cop, but I moved to being an SRO because it seemed to me I was on patrol, and there was a lot of things that were going on with patrol that were just super political, prioritizing policy and optics over public safety. One incident in particular, just a quick vignette. One day I was in roll call, and the day before we had a situation where an LPR went off, license plate reader went off on one of the guys' cars, and he started to initiate a traffic stop on the car. So they're stolen car, police car. So he started initially a traffic stop and didn't pursue them, but in the process of like doing a U-turn, I guess the guy took off, was not a full pursuit. And then the guy flipped the car like shortly after trying to take off from the officer. And the guy who stole the car was the only one that was injured. No one else was injured. So this whole thing happened. Well, the next day in roll call, they tell us, hey, if you see a stolen car, don't try to stop it. Not even don't pursue it, because we had a really strict pursuit policy, but don't even try to initiate a traffic stop to investigate. So and I'm thinking in roll call, like, there's no way I just heard that. Maybe I drifted off, it's early in the morning. Maybe I drifted off and like I heard something else. So I go up to one of the sergeants after roll call. And I said, hey, Sergeant, I just want to make sure I understand this. You guys are telling us that if I see a stolen car, that I'm not even supposed to try to stop it. I understand our pursuit policy, violent felon, but you're telling me I can't even try to stop it. It's like, yeah, well, we're just really worried about liability and what could happen. I said, okay. So I just went out to my car and did my pre-tour inspection when I shift. So that more of those things started to happen. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to just go become an SRO, school resource officer, because I feel like, that's where I can make a real difference. And there's one job, and it's if someone comes in that school to try, well, there's one primary job. If someone comes in that school to try to hurt these kids, take them out, stop them. Mm-hmm. And so, and I know there's other jobs with being an SRO, but
can I add something on that just to add gravitas to this? You became an SRO, if I remember, right on the heels or right around the time that shooter went into the school in Nashville, which is right up the road from you, and killed those kids, right? So, I mean, that's the timing. That's where your headspace was.
So I became an SRO right before that happened. And then we had, let's see, it was like the beginning of the fall semester that I became an SRO. And I was a floater at the time, which means that I would visit different schools and fill in for other SROs, which also gives you the opportunity to kind of figure out the job and the role. It's like OJT. And then we had our spring break, which our schools were out of school for spring break, but Covenant School was not out of school for spring break. And that's when that shooter went into that school and did what they did. So when we came back to school after that week, I mean, everyone was on edge, because you're right. It was right up the street from our school district. Everyone was on edge. And periodically, part of our job as SROs was to go around the school and check the doors. Okay. It'd be like a patrol check, security check the doors to make sure the doors were locked, because the doors were supposed to be locked at all times for security's sake. But you have these complacent teachers that want to crack the door, or it's a nice day outside, but they're not supposed to do that. So we'd go around and do these door audits, basically. And after this Covenant shooting happened, I talked to the schools that I was filling in at, and I said, hey guys, look, if you guys are okay with it, I'm going to patrol today with my rifle with me, because we did not have a place to have our rifles. We had our rifles in our car, locked up in our car, parked off in the parking lot. So I'd have to like run out to the parking lot to get it. So my thinking is, one, we know that these shooters profile schools and look for soft targets. And if they see me walk around the school, and it was going to be condition 3, like no round in the chamber. That way I didn't have to continue to like unload it and stuff to relock it up. But I was going to patrol just with it slung, not like up at the high ready. And I was like, if they see that, they're going to think, okay, I'm not going after that school. And if something were to happen and I was on the back side of the school and it was on the front side, I would already have it with me to be able to respond to contact. Every teacher, every administrator I talked to thought it was awesome. They thought it was, they said, had them coming up to me saying, is this something new you guys are doing? Because like when I saw that at first, I was kind of like set back, but I feel so much safer now because I was taking security seriously. Well, the third day I was doing this, I get a call from my lieutenant. And as I'm doing the door checks, he said, hey, buddy, you busy? That's how they always called us. The first thing they would say out of their mouth, hey, buddy, you busy? Like I should have started saying, yeah, I'm busy. I can't talk right now. I'm always busy. But hey, buddy, you busy? I'm just checking doors. Hey, I know you mean well, but we've been getting some calls that you've been scaring some people and scaring some teachers and parents. I said, really? Who called you? Because I've heard that they love this. Well, I don't really know. I didn't really get any calls. I just heard from your sergeant. Okay. So I called my sergeant. Long story short, no one received calls from parents. No one received calls from teachers. No students complained. 2 other SROs complained about it because they thought that someone was going to complain, right? Because I'm filling it at their school. Now I'm setting this new expectation, new standard that they're thinking, I'm not going to have to like do this now. So they complained, preemptive complaint, I call it. And so this whole thing, I mean, it went all the way up to the chief. Like they're having discussions about and as an outside observer, I can see how you can frame this and say it in a certain way and spin the optics to make me look like this overzealous, crazy officer who's walking around gung-ho with his rifle and not what it actually was.
Can I give some context for those that maybe don't understand? A lot of these campuses are laid out. They're hundreds and hundreds of yards from corner to corner or from building to building. So I don't think it's an unreasonable thing that you were doing to have an AR. The handgun platform is not the right defensive offensive platform for a 200-yard shot.
Yeah.
However, an M4 with a red dot on it would be fantastic for that shot if and when. So I don't think it's unreasonable when you're going around the perimeter of the school checking doors to have that, because like you said, it's now becomes unreasonable to say, well, no, when you see that, you're going to run to your car that's 400 yards away, get your rifle, put it in the red chamber around, run back. Now, how many children can be killed in that time for you to go 800 meters, 400 and 400? That's a half a mile, folks. That's 5 to 10 minutes at a damn dead run with all your gear on. So to me, it's, no, I don't have a problem with it.
And what's kind of funny too is like they always talk about how, we're here to build relationships and we're here for the kid. And I think there is value in that, right? There's these peripheral things that we can do in that position while also focusing on the thing that is security. What's funny about when I was doing this is the kids, they loved it. Like I didn't intend for this to happen, but they would come, oh, what is that? Because they play like Call of Duty and stuff. So they see this cool like gun that's new and novel. Again, that wasn't the goal, but in terms of, they were much more interested. It's like, oh, this is really cool. I like police. I like the police officer that's in the school now because he has this cool tool. So that was kind of a funny aside, but this whole thing happened. Again, it goes all the way up to the chief. I had actually been approved to go to a training course and approved all the way up to the chief. This thing happened, and then they denied me because of manpower right after this happened. And though we had all our manpower. So then we had the summer, and during the summer, Governor Bill Lee passed a bill and it was a new school security bill where if any school had a door that was unsecured and it was discovered by a certified officer, be it THP, the SRO, or just some regular patrol officer, sheriff, whatever, if that door was discovered, they had to report it. It was law that we had to report that door to the proper chain of command and had to go all the way up to the governor's office. And then depending on how many were reported, the school district would be docked funding. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It was creating a consequence for what had been happening for a while, and it basically amounted to a slap on the wrist prior to that. We found a door unsecured.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you got to lock your door, lock it, check it, whatever, move on. So that was over the summer that got passed.
And again, placing into context, this is how the Uvalde killer got in. This is how several other mass killings have occurred by just a simple unlocked door. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the new school year started on the heels of that bill being passed. The first 3 days of school, we had, I think, more than 6 unsecured doors unsecured in the district that were found by SROs, because we were doing our normal door checks, periodic door checks that we did throughout the day. And that's how many, and that's probably an average that we had been finding for years.
Prior to the reporting.
So they all had to be reported. So we had to report them to our sergeant reported lieutenant, all the way up the chain, all the way up to Governor Lee's office. That resulted in like, I don't know how many, like $1 million worth of funding that got docked from the district's, the budget in the district. So rather than address complacency that was leading to these doors being unsecured, they held a secret squirrel meeting with our chief of police and all their attorneys, the school district superintendents and all their attorneys. And the results of this meeting, like they had this meeting, I think it was like Wednesday night, they had this meeting. Then Thursday morning, they were pushing out directives from this meeting. None of this stuff was on paper. They wouldn't even put it on paper. But the directive was, you now are only allowed to do 2 door checks a day, and it has to be scheduled and announced. No more random door checks. And I voiced my frustration, grievance with this directive, and told them how I believe it undermined the bill, undermined the intent of the bill, and was prioritizing budget over safety. And they did not like that. I was like the only SRO that was speaking up. I basically skylined myself, and it was not good for me at that point. We had
the nail that sticks up gets hammered down, buddy.
Yeah, we had several Zoom calls. They told us not to share this with anyone. They told us that it was all secret and we're not supposed to share it, which is BS. It's not a thing. They were almost making like a classification level. It was very bizarre. They're trying to class. It's not a thing. So anyway, so that happened, and that was one of the things that led to me leaving. Another thing, I'm going to share this real briefly. One of the schools I was at, we'd like sit in the front office and just kind of monitor the computers, or what, eat our lunch or whatever. And when parents would come into the school, to pick up their kids, the process was they would have to show a form of ID. And let me ask you, what form of ID do you think most people would show to show their ID?
State issued driver's license.
There you go, driver's license. 99.999%.
Child, you got to have it, right?
Exactly.
You drove a car to get there. You're picking up a kid.
Exactly.
Right. It's not an unreasonable assumption.
Shows a passport. Which, okay, I lived in I worked at a school that's kind of like inner city, so some people walked. She showed a passport, but it was odd, and I didn't say anything to her at the time, but I did get up. I went outside and to kind of observe the parking lot, and I thought, I wonder if she drove. Well, sure enough, she gets in a car with her passport, and I go up to this car and make what's known as consensual contact, for anyone listening who doesn't understand what that means. And consensual contact is anytime an officer comes up to you and says, like, hey, how you doing? Or it's basically any contact that a citizen can make with another citizen. I'm not acting in a law enforcement capacity, or you don't have to talk to me. I went up to her, made consensual contact, and I said, hey, ma'am, I'm just curious, do you have a license? And she did not have a license. And she, again, loaded her kid in the car to take him home. I said, okay, well, I can't let you drive. I'm not going to cite you. Okay. I'm not going to cite you right now, but you need to call someone to come pick you up. And when I say cite, like write a mistake, I'm not going to write you a state citation. Well, she didn't speak English. She was trying to get someone to come up there and pick her up. It turned into this massive, you know what, show. Next day, my sergeant calls me and says, hey, were you telling parents they couldn't pick up their kid if they didn't have their driver's license? I said, absolutely not, Sergeant. This is what happened. And he said, oh, okay. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, I can squash this whole thing. I said, okay, cool. Well, almost 2 months later, a carbon copy incident of this happens. I mean, I'm talking like I'm sitting in the office, lady comes in, shows her passport, I go outside, everything unfolds the same way. This time, I call my sergeant to let him know, like, hey, what's going on? And I could also tell there's already whisperings like, oh, it's that cop that did this last time. And he comes up there and it turns into this unbelievable incident fiasco where it concluded with my sergeant telling me that I was not to enforce any traffic violations on private property on a public school. And one of that traffic violation being someone driving without a license. And I told them, I said, Sergeant, if someone would have come up here DUI, if they'd been drunk and I would have stopped them, no one would bat an eye. I'd probably get a freaking award for it. No one would bat an eye. I said, DUIs represent 30% of motor vehicle accidents. You know what percent are unlicensed drivers? 20%. That's a 10% difference. You're telling me that you'd be completely okay with that, but you're not okay with this. I didn't even cite the lady. I was completely tactful. I wasn't a jerk. I even offered to give the second lady a ride to her house with her kid. I said, and after I tell him all this, his response, this is a sergeant who recently got promoted to lieutenant. He said, so what I'm hearing you say is you want to be a traffic cop. I said, Sergeant, I don't know what part of what I just told you indicates that to you, but no, that's not what I'm telling you at all. He said, well, you know how some people, and I'm almost embarrassed to say this. He said, you know how some people are like really into Star Trek? I'm just really not that into Star Trek. I said, what does that have to do with this? He said, well, I'm just really not into like traffic. I said, yeah, but you're a cop. Well, you know, I could get if it was like them parking in a handicapped spot. He was okay with me getting onto someone for parking in a handicapped spot, but not driving without a license. So again, these are the levels
with children in the car.
With children in the car. And I said, a unlicensed driver is 5 times more likely to get in a wreck than a licensed driver. So I'm here to protect these kids. I'm not protecting this kid if I'm letting them get into a car with an unlicensed driver. I said, that's not safe for that kid. And me protecting them doesn't end with just, a shooter. It's all of these things. It's a drunk driver. It's this, it's all this stuff. It's a holistic approach, but yeah, the conclusion was you were not to enforce any traffic violations on private property. No qualifiers for that statement. That is the statement I was left with. Well, then I had meetings with my lieutenant and had meetings with my captain. And my captain, who he's silver tongue, while we're having these meetings, he told me, he said, I think your problem is like your biggest blind spot is your lack of interpersonal skills. You're just not really good at talking to people. So I was like, sir, you could have told me a lot of things, and that one I've never heard before. But the other thing he said was this is going back to you mentioned that officer. We had this other officer, and I'm not going to mention his name, but he for a while was not wearing his body armor on duty. SRO at the school, not wearing his body armor because he had back problems. Come on, Rich.
Okay, well,
yeah, it's an admin position.
If you can't wear body armor, should you be a police officer? If your back problem are so bad you can't wear 10 ounces of body armor, then guess what, pal?
Yeah. How good's your back going to be when you get shot and you're not wearing your body armor? Yeah. So he not wearing his body armor, and he was actually I'm being very delicate with how I say things because I don't want to give away. He was the SRO at my kid's school. Okay. So that was not okay with me. Well, I knew how my department worked, and I knew that if I were to say something about this, because I talked to other SROs about it and kind of got the gouge of like how this was allowed. And I was like, if I complain about this, nothing's going to happen. So maybe I got some parents to call into the department and complain, and maybe the policy changed the day after they made those complaints. And he was wearing his body armor. So again, this person, this is the person I'm kind of referencing, this retired on duty officer, overweight, didn't wear his body armor. I'm talking to the captain, and he says, take you and, I'm going to say Schmuckatelli, take you and Officer Schmuckatelli. If I had to pick between the two of you, which had more tactical acumen, I'm going to definitely default to you on that, talking to me. But if I had to pick which of you two I wanted to talk to a principal, who do you think I would pick? And I looked at him and I said, well, sorry, I guess it depends on the principal, which I know was not the answer he was looking for. Well, I'm going to go with Officer Schmuckatelli on that. And I said, okay. And we never had our follow-up meeting, but in my follow-up meeting, I was going to ask, well, if an active shooter came into the school, who do you think they would least likely be willing to meet? But that was the.
Who would you want your children? The school that your children go to. You want officer friendly, who speaks well to the principal and doesn't wear his body armor, probably doesn't know which end the bullet comes out of the gun, or the guy that was on a CQB team in the Marine Corps. I mean, it's case closed. I want to get to some of the comments here, Taylor. That was.
I think it's stacking up.
Yeah. Let's see here. I'm going to go with this one from Don. This is going back to, he says, I'm going to disagree about carrying your duty weapon all the time. Most of the daily routine for our military is drudgery, maintenance of vehicles, and work details. Actual tactical training isn't a daily occurrence. Here in the States, we have all of our domestic problems that come with proximity to daily life: alcohol, drugs, family, community issues. Soldiers are people too, and they have emotional, physical, and fiscal issues that mainstream America has. Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think we need to backtrack and qualify our comments. I'm in no way saying that that they should be, running around with their digital, uniform on, and for us digital camis.
Yeah.
With a firearm.
Yeah.
With their Taurus and a Serpa holster underneath their camis or whatever. I don't mean that at all. What I'm saying is I don't think it's unreasonable to say you can have it in a locked space inside your vehicle, and then once you even get off base, you feel free to gun back up. But right now you can't even come on base with it. And I had one of my master sergeants, I got a call in the middle of the night. Oh my God, we've stopped one of your master sergeants at the gate. We did a random inspection and he's got 2 Glocks in his truck. What's the problem?
Yeah.
Guy's a combat wounded veteran, man. What are we talking about here? I mean, am I missing something? This is an infantry master sergeant, gold wings, stud, Purple Heart, and we're gonna get freaked out because he's got a gun case in his truck. I'm not interested in that call. Then I'll go down there and I'm act like, hey, don't you do it again. And in reality, I don't give a crap. It's ridiculous.
Meanwhile, he's driving a vehicle, which it's like, that's way more. Causes way more deaths.
3,000-pound weapon. Yeah. I love Dr. Fuller's comment. And he's absolutely right. I think you'd agree with this. In this day and age, SROs could easily be surreptitiously armed with a fold-up 12-inch AR carbine and a JanSport backpack. Yeah, and he's absolutely right. I've got a EDC sling bag from Vertex, and you could fold up an AR and put it in there, and I mean, you can rapidly deploy that thing. So even if we're scared about optics, there's an option. What do you think?
They tried to do that. We actually, one of our sergeants, great guy, he tried to get that through. Not SRO sergeant. He was the range master. He was trying to get them to do this because he had the whole setup. He knew exactly what we needed, the backpack and everything. Their concern was that, we might accidentally leave that rifle somewhere unattended.
Well, off-body carry does have its issues. I completely understand that.
And the answer to that is, then if that happens, fire the SRO. Make it a serious consequence.
Well, and air marshals have left their guns in the bathroom on airplanes. I mean, I get it, but it's like, does that mean air marshals can't fly armed?
Yeah.
Because one asshat left his SIG in the bathroom.
Yeah.
No, we hold that guy accountable and punish him accordingly and set an example and do some remedial training and make sure we're selecting the right people and hold them to the appropriate standards and giving them the right training. It's always default to this. I don't know. I remember being a cop. It's like on Sundays, If you worked a Sunday, man, you literally had to go hide. Like, where can my cruiser not be spotted? Because if you got a call and it's like, hey, these people leaving church, they said they saw your patrol car at the 7-Eleven. Like, I was grabbing a cup of coffee. Well, we told you you don't make traffic stops. You don't do nothing on Sunday. And in the town that I was a police officer in, and you better not even have your car spotted. So it's like, where am I going to hide today?
It's funny you say that, because one of the things that happened too was obviously the rifle's locked in the car. There's no safes in the rooms. And one of the schools I was at, and I would park my car as close as I could to the door, either like in the little drop off area or back it up, not to where it's blocking the door, but I will say in a conspicuous way, so that if someone is profiling the school or casing the school, they'll say, oh, there's definitely an officer there, because it's not just lost in the sea of cars. Well, while I was doing this, I got a call from my sergeant, and let me give you some context for this sergeant. This sergeant one day was walking around with no magazine in her gun. And I said,
I hope everybody heard that. Say that again. No magazine
in her gun, but her gun's in her holster.
On duty.
And I go up to her and I said, and this is on duty in the schools. I said, hey, Sergeant, I don't know if you know this or not, but your gun doesn't have a mag in it. And she was like, oh. She like laughed at it and didn't immediately fix it. If someone would have told me that, I would have been mortified. I would have gone to the closest men's restroom and I would have loaded up and done a press check. And I would have been embarrassed for weeks, months.
Well, what she should have done is called, reported herself. In all honesty.
Yes. So she didn't do anything, because we also have the lieutenant I think the lieutenant and the captain were with us, because we're doing something at the schools, and she doesn't fix it, and then just like casually takes one of her mags out of her pouch and inserts it into the mag well. Again, doesn't do a press check. I have no idea if there was a round chambered or what, but so I'm just framing the context of this officer who calls me one day about my vehicle being parked and says, hey, you can't park your car in front of the school like that. I said, why? Well, because if someone drives by the school, they may think something's happened. That was the response. I said,
unbelievable.
Okay, well, you're the boss. I'll move it. Yeah.
And see, that risk averse mentality, and you see this in the military these days, you see it in law enforcement these days, and there's going to come a time where that pendulum's going to swing hard, because I don't know where this came from. I think my friend Will Wood said it, but he goes, traditions are answers to problems we've forgotten, or to say it another way, like, policies and procedures, perhaps even are answers to things we've forgotten. And it's like, here we go again. And I want to go back to the point you made, Taylor, about, hey, look, I can't let you leave here with these children in your car. You don't have a license, right? Which I think we'd all agree is very reasonable. You got in trouble for that. You can't do it anymore. You got slapped on the hand. But let's take this and say, what happens if they would have gotten killed a mile down the road, and it's on CCTV camera that you stopped them, and it's okay today. Just make sure you bring it tomorrow. You go ahead. And she gets her kids, kills herself and her kids, and maybe somebody else.
Yep.
Brother, we'd be having that. You'd be wearing an orange jumpsuit.
Yep.
You'd been fired and prosecuted for felony child neglect or whatever.
100%. And even if not, it would be on my conscience. Like, even if the second time that it happened, right, where I saw it was like the carbon copy incident, even if I thought to myself, which I did, I was like, gosh, do I want this heat right now? Like, do I really want to do this again? But like, my conscience was just weighing on me too much. And I was like, I have to. I can't. I now have even stronger heuristics to tell me that this indicates this person doesn't have a license, because it matches this previous incident, which we use as officers. We use those heuristics. And if I were to say, you know what, I just want to get off work on time. I don't want to deal with this. And then she pulls out and kills the kid. I could probably be like, not even say anything. And it would like go away. But I would know for the rest of my life, you could have stepped in and stopped that. And I just couldn't let that go. But then exactly like you said, it's the judging after the fact and the whole hindsight thing. And yeah, it's like, oh, nothing happened. Well, yeah, because maybe I stopped something from happening, and now you're going to get on to me about this. And then when I'm meeting with this sergeant who's talking about Star Wars and how he doesn't understand, traffic and things, he talks to them, and then he comes back to me. He's like, all right, come on, because we had to go work a basketball game. He's like, come on, let's go over there and work the basketball game. I said, are they good? Like, are they getting a ride? He's like, yeah, they're getting a ride. Well, come to find out, I heard from another administrator at the school that they just drove off. So I'm pretty sure he just told them, like, hey, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to get
wait till we get out of here.
I'm going to get Officer Gung Ho over here, and I'm going to take him across the street, and you guys just leave. We'll be inside, and no one will see what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so the culmination of all this, and I forgot to mention, this is a pretty big deal, but the culmination of all this was it kept getting worse and worse. And I kept seeing this trend of prioritizing policy and optics over public safety. And given the severity of with the school thing, I tell people, I'm not trying to be dramatic with this, but that was like the closest I've ever been to like a government conspiracy. I wrote a letter to Governor Bill, yeah, I can say that because I said it's the school in Tennessee. I wrote a letter to Governor Lee, a 6-page letter, whistleblowing about what happened, and told them all the details of everything. And I had another SRO that wrote a letter as well, so it was 2 of us. It wasn't just me. He was just the only other one that had the balls to do it. And I left shortly after that happened because I realized there was no future. There's no future for me here. I tell people it was going to that unit was the worst thing that could have happened for my career at that department, and the best thing that could have happened for me and my family.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it's so eerily similar to the things I write in my amazing book on violence and varietals.
It's back there somewhere. Signed copy.
But I mean, it was the best thing at the time. I thought, oh my God, this is what I thought I was going to do. My career is why I joined the Marine Corps. It's why I did the things I did. I struggled and did everything I could to get here. Now I get here and I go, this is the worst thing I've ever done in my life. I can't believe this. But I think you and I and a lot of people maybe out there listening to us or watching the show, we were the frogs that hopped out of the proverbial pot before it started boiling. Like, I can't be here. I can't be here in good conscience. It's not morally defendable. It's not in any way, I don't know. But it goes to what Bruce says here. Public opinion overrules safety standards. Same concerns, just a different jurisdiction. I believe Bruce is up there in Michigan doing the job. And Dr. Fuller reminds us, hey, a conscience is only a problem if you have one. Tony says, ID, isn't that racist? And that's another thing. Like, well, it's racist to ask for an ID when they're going to vote. Is it? Do they have to show ID to do a lot of the things? And one of the congresswomen that I believe from Texas recently had someone on. She's just like, let me ask you a question. Do you have to show ID to get a marriage license? Yeah. Do you have to show ID to get a bank account? Do you have to show an ID? And she just goes down the list. But you don't think they should have to show an ID to vote?
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy. What does Doug say here? He says, I've said it before and I'll say it again. The number one issue in law enforcement today is a lack of real leadership. Lots of good test takers, lots of folks wanting the pay and prestige, serious lack of true leadership. And of course, Doug is a lieutenant up in north of us. Bruce says, thanks for another great show. Yeah, and I've kept you on here for an hour and 40 minutes, Taylor. Thank you so much for coming on today.
This has been awesome.
Please, if you could, tell us where we can find your program. Tell us where we can find your YouTube channel, your website, train with you, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So they can find the new course that I just launched if they go to courses.defendersanddisciples.com, and I could probably put a link or something. And actually today and tomorrow, I'm running a promo for your viewers, 25% off for the course if they use promo code AWS25. So today and tomorrow, 25% off the course if they use AWS25. And I just want to show appreciation for you and your listeners because you guys do some great stuff. But yeah, if they want to check out that course, it's courses.defendersanddisciples.com.
And where do if they want to follow your YouTube channel, which I highly encourage, where do they need to do with that, Taylor?
Just go to YouTube and type in Defenders and Disciples, and it'll be the one with the logo with like the X, with the DAD. Check
Like
us
on
out.
your hat and on your shirt.
Just like this. And
Bruce says, thanks for another great show. Guile says, great show, guys. Glad Rich didn't freeze today or rename the show Tea with Taylor. Wi-Fi in the county, man. I tell you what.
That's the British version, Tea with Taylor.
Yeah. Taylor, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you so much for what you're doing in your community and for fighting the good fight and not just rolling over, man. We need more people like you, brother. I mean that.
Thank you, Rich. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much for you guys doing as well.
All right, guys and gals out there in Warrior Nation, God bless you all. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe because the fight is coming. Be ready.